Thank you, sir.
We call the next witness, Your Honor. Your Honor, the defendant calls Eric Carita, please.
Right this way, sir. Please follow me. Face the clerk and raise your right hand.
Sir, do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give to this court and this jury will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you, sir.
Have a seat, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, sir. Would you state your name, please, spelling your first and last name?
Eric Carita, C-A-R-I-T-A,
How do you spell your first name?
E-R-I-C.
Okay. Where do you live, sir?
Thompson, Connecticut.
And how are you employed?
I'm a private forensic consultant, and I'm the owner of Ace Forensic Consulting Services.
Can you describe for us, please, your educational background?
I have a bachelor's from Eastern Connecticut State University, and my graduate degree is from the University of Connecticut Center for Applied Genomics and Technology.
And what is your graduate degree?
In genetics.
Okay. Is that a Master of Science?
Correct.
Okay. Can you tell us, please, your employment history in the forensic field?
Well, I started out as actually an intern September of 2001. I'm at the Connecticut State Forensic Lab. From 2001 to 2003, I did an internship in service learning within their DNA unit at the Connecticut Lab. From 2003 to 2005, I was a laboratory technician within the nuclear DNA unit at the Connecticut Lab. And then from 2005 to 2014, I was a casework analyst within the nuclear DNA unit at the Connecticut State Lab.
All right, let me stop you there. You referred to the Connecticut State. What's the name of the laboratory, please, that you're working in?
The Department of Public Safety, Division of Scientific Services, Forensic Science Laboratory.
Okay. And what kind of testing does does the Connecticut Forensic Science Laboratory do?
All areas of forensics. With respect to DNA, we do both nuclear DNA testing and mitochondrial DNA testing.
And mitochondrial DNA testing is normally done on hair, is that right?
It can be, yes.
Okay. And does your laboratory in Connecticut that you work for from 2003 to 2014, does it do testing for the prosecution?
Yes, it does.
And tell us about that, please.
Evidence is submitted to the laboratory from a submitting agency, a law enforcement agency, or the state's attorney's office, the prosecutor, or the public defender's office, the defense. Will submit evidence to the forensic lab. We will do DNA testing on it, generate results, make comparisons, and report those comparisons out and testify if need be.
So am I correct that in Connecticut, the state laboratory does testing for either side?
I object to the forms of the question.
Sustain.
Does the Connecticut laboratory do testing for the prosecution in some cases?
I object.
Sustain from.
Who does the state forensic laboratory in Connecticut do testing for? What was the period of time that you served as a DNA examiner in that laboratory?
I was a forensic science examiner from 2005 to 2014.
And in general, what were your duties there as a forensic scientific examiner?
I would take evidence in that was previously submitted by the submitting agencies we just discussed. I would either take swabbings or cuttings off of pieces of evidence myself, or they would be swabbed or cut off by someone else in the forensic biology unit, and those would be transferred over to me in DNA, where I would perform nuclear DNA testing on those pieces of evidence, those swabbings, those cuttings, and then make my report, make comparisons, and testify if need be.
Can you estimate the approximate number of DNA samples that you processed over that 10-year period from 2005 to 2014 that you worked as a forensic science examiner in that lab?
I processed, analyzed, and evaluated thousands of DNA samples within that time.
And can you estimate approximately how many pieces of evidence you made swabbings of during your work at the Connecticut Forensic Lab?
I did hundreds of swabbings and cuttings from pieces of evidence.
And can you tell us, please, what is a swabbing of evidence with respect to DNA testing, Mr. Carita?
A swabbing of evidence is pretty simple. It's a sterile cotton swabbing in which you moisten it with distilled water, sterile water, and you just swab or brush it against the surface of an object in order to draw DNA or pull DNA into that swabbing. That swabbing is then dried, and then it can be stored and tested days, months, years later, if need be.
And is that a standard of how DNA evidence is obtained from evidentiary samples in your field?
That is one of the ways, yes.
Okay. You also mentioned cuttings. What is a cutting?
A cutting is, we'll say you have a piece of fabric and you have a potential stain on the fabric. You can take a scalpel or a pair of scissors and cut out that area of the fabric in order to retain it and then potentially test it later.
Okay. And when you do cuttings, when you did cuttings or swabbings, where were those done?
They were done within the Connecticut Forensic Laboratory.
Okay. And under what kinds, were there any kind of special conditions that you had to utilize in order to safeguard the integrity of the evidence?
Secure facility, sterile environment, cleaned with bleach solutions, all utensils that were used, scissors, stuff like that, cleaned with a bleach solution or disinfectant in order to make sure there was no extraneous DNA on those. And then basically making sure they were packaged properly, labeled properly, sealed properly, initialed, and documented properly.
Now, you testified that you left that laboratory in 2014?
Correct.
And what have you been doing during the past year, sir?
I've been running my own business, Ace Forensic Consulting Services.
Okay. And in that business, do you, what do you do?
Review documentation from laboratories performing cases on their DNA work, reviewing reports, analyzing data, doing trainings for individuals pertaining to DNA, stuff like that.
Okay. And who do you do that work for?
Whoever hires me. The defense, if the defense has hired me to review a case, the prosecution can hire me to review a case if they want. Different groups can hire me for standard DNA trainings or specific aspects of DNA trainings they want.
Have you, in the course of your career, done any teaching at all in the field of forensic DNA?
Yes, I
Tell us
did.
about that.
Excuse me?
Tell us about that, please.
I did lectures and instruction work for the University of New Haven's Forensic Science program and also University of Connecticut's.
And have you authored or co-authored any peer-reviewed scientific journal articles in the field of forensic DNA?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Have you ever made presentations at any scientific conferences in the field?
Yes, I have.
And you mentioned trainings. What kind of trainings have you? These are trainings that you put on yourself?
Or with a group of individuals. We did a number not only in Connecticut, but I can do some myself as my own company.
And who have you presented trainings for in the field of forensic DNA?
While within the Connecticut lab, I did.
No, well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
While within the Connecticut lab with the group of other analysts and supervisors, we did multiple trainings for groups of prosecutors or from the state's attorney's office, groups of public defenders from the public defender's office. We also did groups for high school teachers, training on forensics for high school teachers through a program with Pfizer, in which we did trainings for them. As a private consultant, I've done multiple trainings for defense groups or defense attorney groups. I'm in the process of, at the end of this month, scheduling a training for a police department on DNA handling, anti-contamination procedures, packaging, stuff like that. And an attorney I'm working with in New York, we're attempting right now to set up a training for a group of judges in New York.
Have you ever testified before as an expert in the field of forensic DNA analysis?
Yes, I have.
And approximately how many times have you testified before in court respecting that field?
Probably around 50 times in Connecticut and another 5 to 10 maybe between Massachusetts and New York.
And out of all the times that you've testified in court in criminal cases, approximately what percentage of that time have you testified for the prosecution, and approximately what percentage of the time have you testified for the defense, sir?
Probably 95% for the prosecution while in Connecticut, and then another 5% for the defense.
Okay. Now, were you retained by defense counsel in this case, by me in particular, in January of this year, 2015, to do something in this case?
Yes, I was.
Okay. And tell us, please, what were you retained to do by the defense back in January of this year?
I was retained to take a swabbing of a piece of evidence that the Massachusetts State Police had in their custody, then to send those swabbings of that evidence I did to a private forensic laboratory in Dallas, Texas, known as Cellmark Forensics.
Okay. And in order to carry out that task, did you have to interface with the folks at Cellmark?
Yes, I communicated with them.
Okay. And what was your purpose in communicating with them?
I object. The rule. Not what you said, but you may testify as to what the purpose.
Just tell us, not what was said, but your purpose in communicating with Cellmark, please.
To set up the shipping and delivery of the swabbings.
Okay. And in order to carry out this task, did you have to arrange access to a suitable laboratory to carry out the swabbing?
Yes.
And did you do that?
Yes.
And tell us about the arrangements that you made, please, sir.
I called Elaine Pagliaro, the director.
I object. Past that. You will. You may testify as to who you called.
Don't tell us the substance of the conversation, please. Just tell us who you called, please, and why you called that person.
I called Miss Elaine Pagliaro, the director of the Henry C. Lee Institute, the University of New Haven, to set up a secure room where the swabbing could be done.
Okay. And were you successful in making those arrangements?
Yes.
Okay. And on January 13th of 2015, did you in fact conduct a swabbing of a piece of evidence in this case?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And where did that occur?
At the Henry C. Lee Institute.
Okay. And did you meet some folks at the Henry C. Lee Institute in order to accomplish this task?
Yes, I did.
Tell us who you met there that day, January 13th, 2015.
I met with Mrs. Pagliaro, and also I met with forensic scientists from the Massachusetts State Police, Daniel Pratt, Trooper Giardino, and Trooper Watson, both from the Massachusetts State Police.
Okay. And were you provided, by you I mean you and the three people from the Mass State Police, were you provided access to a an appropriate laboratory facility.
Yes, I was.
What was that facility at the Henry C. Lee Institute that you were provided access to that day?
It was called the Shaw Crime Scene Lab.
And what is the nature of the Shaw Crime Scene Lab?
It's an area that you have to swipe yourself in electronically with basically a swipe card in order to gain access to it. It's a laboratory space, bench setup, a table setup, where you can evaluate, analyze, look at evidence.
Is it separate from other parts of the facility?
Yes, it is.
And is it secure?
Yes, it is.
Now, who went into that portion of the laboratory, please?
Myself, Trooper Giardino, Trooper Watson, and Daniel Pratt, forensic scientist Daniel Pratt, Elaine Pagliaro led us into that area.
Okay. And did you have to don any special equipment before undertaking this swabbing task?
Yes, I did.
What did you do?
I used personal protective equipment, also known as PPEs. One was a face mask. The other was I double gloved, 2 sets of gloves on each hand, and lab coats. We do this for 2 reasons. 1, keep me off the evidence. I don't want to get on the evidence and contaminate it. 2, keep the evidence off of me. I don't want anything on the evidence getting on me either.
Now, did you have to use certain utensils to carry out this swabbing process?
Yes,
What utensils did you use?
tweezers and scissor.
And did you do anything to ensure that those utensils were in a clean, sterile condition?
Yes, I cleaned them myself. I sterilized them
How
myself.
did you do that?
Using a disinfectant spray followed by an alcohol wipe, basically taking any remnants of that disinfectant spray off of it. Basically, you just spray it, wipe it down, take the alcohol wipe it down, and they're sterilized.
Now, was this entire procedure videotaped or memorialized in some way?
Yes, it was videotaped by Trooper Watson.
Okay. And tell us what was, so when you were all ready, you had all your stuff on, and you had you were in the laboratory, what was the first thing that happened?
Basically, clean everything up, get everything on, clean everything up. What you then do is the evidence, the envelope, was transferred into my custody by Trooper Giardino.
Okay, let's stop there. So we're showing you some photographs. Do you recognize what those photographs are? Let's start with the first one.
Yes.
Okay, and what is the first photograph?
One side of the exterior envelope that was given to me by Trooper Giardino.
Okay, and let's look at this second one, please. What is the second photograph?
The opposite side of that same envelope that was given to me by Trooper Giardino.
Okay, I'd offer these 2 photographs to start with that.
Any objection? No objection. Maybe match the next exhibit?
So you're showing your 432, that's just the front of the envelope that was given to you by Trooper Giardino that day?
Correct.
Okay. And 433 is the back of the envelope?
Correct.
Okay. And did you then proceed to open the envelope?
I did.
Okay. I'll show you 2 more photographs. Do you recognize the first photograph?
Yes.
Okay, what do you recognize the first photograph to be?
That is the interior packaging that held the piece of evidence that was inside that envelope you just saw. So this is the interior envelope that was packaged within that one.
Okay, and the label, that's the white label that's on the bottom of that photograph.
Yeah.
Who put that there?
I did.
Okay, and are those your initials on there?
They are.
Okay, and the second photograph in that series, you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize that to be?
That is the piece of evidence.
Okay, that you swabbed that day?
Correct.
And was that piece of evidence inside the envelope that you just told us about?
Yes.
I'd offer these as the next two. And do these photographs fairly and accurately depict what you saw that day?
Yes.
I'd offer them as the next exhibit, Your Honor.
In that sense,
So 434, that's the envelope that was inside the outer envelope?
Correct.
Okay. And 435, that's the piece of evidence that you actually swabbed that day?
Correct.
Now, tell us, please, what did you use to swab that evidence?
Sterile cotton swabs.
Okay. And why don't you describe to us the process that you used that day to swab that evidence?
What I did was sterile cotton swabs. If you want to think about it, it's almost like a hard Q-tip on a wooden stick. And it was moistened with distilled water. Tweezers were then used, sterile tweezers were then used to hold the piece of evidence in place. And the exterior of the entire object was swabbed in order to attempt to collect or suck up that DNA that could have potentially been on the exterior of that piece of evidence. I then took a dry swab, didn't moisten it with distilled water, and then swabbed the exterior again in order to pull up any residual moisture or water I had left on it from the wet swab, and collected those both.
And as far as the sterile cotton swabs that were used, did you supply those yourself ultimately?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Now, after you finished making these two swabbings, the wet one and the dry one, what did you do with them?
They were repackaged. Well, first they were allowed to dry. Then they were repackaged back into their original sterile sleeve that they originally came out of. That sterile sleeve was taped shut with evidence tape. I initialed and dated it, and then I had Trooper Giardino initial and date that evidence sleeve as well. I then transferred that sleeve into a letter envelope, manufactured, sealed that, evidence taped, sealed that, initialed it, dated it, had Trooper Giardino initial and date it. That evidence, that envelope, then went into a manila envelope, which was then sealed with evidence tape. I initialed, dated, and Trooper Giardino initialed it as well.
Show you two more photographs. Do you recognize those?
Yes, I do.
What do you recognize those to be?
These are the final exterior packaging, the final manila envelope that the evidence was packaged in and sent to Sunmark Forensics.
After you finished swabbing?
After it was swabbed.
and it was sealed and signed, initialed by you and by Trooper Giordino.
Correct.
I'd offer these as the next two photographs.
No objection.
Four 437.
Now, were these two troopers and the criminalist from the Mass State Police Lab present throughout this entire procedure?
Yes, they were.
Okay. Now, tell us what you did, please, with these packaged up swabbings after you put them inside all of those envelopes.
The package swabbing went, I took custody of it, of the swabbings themselves. The evidence was then repackaged into both its original packaging. It came in, the small envelope and the larger one, and it was transferred back to Trooper Giordino. So he took the evidence, I took the swabbings. I then...
I'm sorry, let's break that up, because I didn't ask you a very good question. So the evidence, what happened, the evidence itself that you swabbed, tell us again what happened to that evidence after you swabbed it.
The evidence itself, that bluish-green material, was repackaged back in its two original envelopes, the smaller little one and then back into the larger one, which were the first couple pictures. And I transferred that back to Trooper Giordino. I basically handed it back to him and he took custody of it.
Okay. And with respect to the swabbings, the two swabbings that you told us you made from that evidence and then packaged in all those envelopes, what did you do with those swabbings?
I drove that same day straight from University of New Haven to the FedEx office in Orange, Connecticut, and shipped them overnight to Dallas, Texas, to Cellmark Forensics.
Okay. And did that package leave your site at all from the time that you left the laboratory in New Haven to the time that you turned it over to FedEx for shipping to Cellmark?
No.
And after you shipped the swabbings to Cellmark, did you document everything that you've told us about today in a written report?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And at some point later on, after Cellmark had concluded its testing, did you receive a package back from Cellmark?
Yes, I did.
Thank you, Mr. Creed. I have no further questions.
Thank you.
When were you first engaged by Mr. Sultan?
January of this year.
And when you were engaged by Mr. Sultan, did he tell you that the Commonwealth had previously offered to test that item, the piece of it?
Objection.
Could I be seen with me?
we come to sidebar again in this, Your Honor, please?
Now, Mr. Carita, you began your ACE forensic consulting while you were employed with the Connecticut lab, is that correct?
That is not correct.
When you say that is not correct, what do you mean by that?
That's not correct.
Well, you have a LinkedIn site, true?
Correct.
And you indicate on your LinkedIn site that you've worked as a private DNA consultant since 2003, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. That forensic DNA consultant, private practice counseling and consultation from March of 2003 until the present, is that correct?
That is correct.
And in November, specifically on November 17th of 2011, you actually gave a presentation to the Kings County Criminal Bar Association, isn't that correct?
Not sure the exact date, but yes, that's correct.
And you did that in your capacity as a forensic DNA consultant, private consultant, is that true?
That is correct.
Okay, and so it was just the corporation, Ace Forensic, didn't exist?
Correct. I
Okay.
was a sole proprietor. The name and that company, that LLC, was not created until after. Correct.
So you, during your time working at the Connecticut lab, were providing private consulting for the purposes of, in particular, DNA, but other forensics while you were employed by the state of Connecticut, true?
That is correct.
And are you aware that that practice is prohibited in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts?
I am aware of that.
Okay. Now, when you gave your lecture in November of 2011, one of the things that you indicated that you wanted to receive as a private consultant was a copy of all pertinent non-laboratory generated paperwork or reports associated with the case, and then you cite, among other things, all of the police reports. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And did you ask Mr. Sultan for all of that information when you were engaged by him?
He was given my standard discovery request form.
Okay, and did you receive all of that information?
No, I did not.
You did not receive any of that information?
I received some, but not all of it.
Okay, could you tell us, please, what additional information Mr. Sultan gave to you, the private forensic consultant, in relationship to the facts of this case?
I received a package containing a section or one portion of the DNA testing that was performed by the Massachusetts laboratory.
Anything else?
A disc of the testing I performed.
Anything else?
An agreement from the judge upon certain issues, not to discuss them, those type of things.
Did you receive any reports, police reports?
No, I did not.
Okay. Did Mr. Sultan make you aware that he had previously viewed the item?
Yes,
Okay, in December of 2014, is that correct?
correct, I was aware of that.
Okay. And is it fair to say, did you learn that when Mr. Sultan viewed the item, he handled the item not using all of the protections that you've described?
I don't know exactly how it was handled. I wasn't there. It wasn't videotaped as I was, so the information I have is that I can't tell you whether a mask was worn or gloves were worn or stuff like that.
Well, did you become aware that Mr. Sultan used a non-sterile pen to remove the gum from the coin envelope?
Objection.
This is
Seems a fact,
form of
not
that question.
Well, do you know, sir, based on any information, that Mr. Sultan removed the item using a non-sterile pen from the coin envelope?
Yes, I am.
Okay. That Mr. Sultan placed the gum on a non-sterile surface, a wooden table. Did you know that?
I am not aware of that.
Now, when you were employed by the state police or the Department of Public Safety in 2011 in Connecticut, the DNA section of the laboratory failed in audit, is that correct?
I do not believe they failed in audit.
Well, you're aware of over 30 pages of finding by the Association of Criminal Laboratory Directors, findings of the State Department of Public Safety Connecticut Lab,
Correct. Could you give that name again?
ASCLD, is that
The
correct?
American Society of Crime Lab Directors Laboratory Accreditation.
Right. Are you aware of those findings?
They received findings,
Right.
basically, that says that we noticed these things, we'd like you to fix. Yeah.
And it was more than just, we want you to fix things, there were certain things that the lab no longer could do, isn't that true?
I'm not quite sure I understand what you mean.
Couldn't upload any information to the National CODIS database, isn't that correct? As a result of these findings?
No, you're incorrect.
I'm incorrect?
Yes, sir.
From a period of July of 2011 until February of 2012, what was the circumstance of the lab?
The laboratories, the Connecticut State Laboratories accreditation expired. What happened was, basically, if you want to think about it, the same thing as your license. You got till January 1st to renew your license. If you don't renew it by that date, as of January 2nd, it's expired. Well, what happened within Connecticut was that administration did not schedule the ASCLD lab accreditation within the proper amount of time. Therefore, that time period elapsed, if you want to think about it, just like your license. And from that point on until the audit was rescheduled and completed, yes, the laboratory was unable to upload profiles into CODIS, but not from an audit finding.
Well, the audit was in July of 2011, correct?
Correct.
And at that point, the lab no longer could upload any information to CODIS, true?
Correct.
And the lab ability to do that wasn't reinstated until February of 2012 when it actually finally passed the audit, true?
Correct. You have to complete your audit before they'll reaccredit you. So it doesn't matter when it elapses. You still then need to complete the audit at some point in order to gain then access back to the ability to use CODIS and input profiles into CODIS. Correct.
So, in answer to my question, the answer is actually yes. You weren't allowed to do that because of the ASCLD findings, correct?
No, my understanding is, and based upon the directors at the time instructions, was that the audit, the accreditation expired. It wasn't revoked. It wasn't as if a license was taken away because you did something wrong. It expired. Time expired.
My question had to do with uploading to CODIS.
Correct. The accreditation has to do with that. If you're not accredited, you can't upload to CODIS.
Okay. Did you inform Mr. Sultan that the lab that you worked at as a DNA analyst in July of 2011 failed to pass an ASCLD audit?
Objection.
No.
You didn't tell him. Did you tell Mr. Sultan, you've described here to this jury that you've testified in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts as to your findings related to DNA, correct?
Your Honor, can we approach sidebar?